So let me dive right in here. So, believe it or not, it does snow in New York. It hasn't, we haven't had really a big storm in a while, but basically, we do get these mesoscale snow bands. And it's not just us, it's over the whole Northeast and many other parts of the world. And these are the ones that cause problems. When you think about the crippling snowfall like we had in 2013, Nemo, as it was called, the storm, and it paralyzes, it's actually 347 just down the road here, which everyone, the cars were stuck and so forth. So a lot of this heavy snowfalls forms within these mesoscale snow bands. And I'll try to emphasize there's some things we understand about these snow bands, and there's many things we do not understand. And so this is where some of the science questions are and so forth. So just to give you another feel of the complexity, here's an animation of a storm way back 2011. And a cyclone is moving up the coast here, and we're looking in the comma head northwest of the cyclone. You can see the diverse set of structures that exist within the storm, ending, if you see here, with what we call a larger scale snow band, kind of on the northwest side that pivoted through Stony Brook. But there's a lot of cellular structures, smaller scale structures, and so forth here. And the goal is to try to understand the environments and what controls a lot of these structures and forms them. So forth. So there's conceptual models, and so a goal of this project is to improve these conceptual models. So this is work of Philip Yeh. Basically, this is from House's textbook, so to speak. And so all he has basically is this occlusion band northwest, which you can consider that as this big primary band we saw in that animation, little surge band, but there's basically not much going on in the comma head north of the cyclone. I mean, there just wasn't a lot of observations and thinking about what's going on there. So we wanted to improve on this conceptual model with this sort of project. So what Philip did, which he'll actually be defending his little advertisements, right, end of the semester, he did a climatology of these structures using composite radar over the Northeast, using 12 radars. He developed his own object identified a precipitation structure algorithm. I think it's called ID Pro, and the paper is in JTech that came out earlier this year. But this was a dramatic improvement based on other algorithms to detect all the fine scale structures that you see here in the lower left. So he crunched over 12 cool seasons of structure data from the radar over the Northeast. And on the right, it's a little complicated, but we're looking at basically probability. I'm sure we have a pointer that works. No. So try one more. Roll up here. No. Well, yeah, maybe the mouse. I'm holding this mic like Phil Donahue. Yeah, it shows how old I am. But basically, this is probability and the length. And then here we actually have the length and the width of these structures. And the point here is that in past literature, including from our own group, we've tended to break down these structures into definitions of primary bands and multi-bands and so forth. And this clearly shows that those definitions of larger scale primary bands and smaller ones are completely arbitrary, because in reality, you have a really nice distribution here. There's no clear demarcation. And you can see the cloud here, how these definitions fit into the overall realm of length and width. So there's a full spectrum of these structures, and that animation probably illustrates that, even that I just showed you, like that. So that's what we're dealing with, is trying to understand this full distribution of structures from large scale bands to small. And these large scale bands that draw a lot of attention are only 3% of the banded structure. So they're very rare. But when they happen, those are the ones that have 3-4 inch plus snowfall rates an hour, for example. So I mentioned this conceptual model, and so Philip, in the recent paper that came out a few months ago, has tried to improve that by looking at the cyclone relative structures here within the comma head. The cyclone's in the middle of the diagram. These little ovals are the length, and then the aspect ratio, width over length, is shaded. So, and he broke this up to zonal cyclones, meridional cyclones, and the deeper meridional cyclones, the stronger ones. And you can see, if you have zonal tracks, a lot of these banded structures on the northeast side of the cyclone. somewhat smaller in scale. Once we have meridional cyclones, which are heading up the coast, that's when you start getting these larger structures north and northwest, and then even increasing after that. So this climatology is built up our knowledge of the full spectrum of structures relative to the cyclone tracks, building on those that Howe's conceptual model. What he's currently working on now, which is a lot of is the environment associated with these structures. I mean, the question is, if you're in different quadrants, what's favoring these structures versus the other? And that's really where some of the science questions are, moving forward, and so forth. But I'll let Philip defend that here in a couple of months. The other big opportunity is, I'm calling it, to kind of end my presentation. The last thing is the band ingredients, and and we had a whole field program on this, impacts, NASA, to try to collect data with aircraft and so forth. The conceptual model or ingredients in the textbooks and past papers has been the idea that you need some sort of lifting mechanism, frontogenesis, which induces a direct circulation, moisture, and then some sort of instability to make it more convective in nature with that. And then continuing on, thinking about the transition to multibands, if you basically decrease the stability, make it more unstable, that's past studies suggested that's when you would basically get into this more unstable multiband. There's multiple structures. So that was sort of the idea or hypothesis on the table. The problem is that when you look at the environments, like Saraganitis and Philip, as I mentioned, looking at it, less than half the cases or half the bands have frontogenesis co-located with them at any level. So it seems to be more complicated than that with that. And furthermore, there's limited instability. It can actually be somewhat stable in some of these multi-band regimes, in this unstable conceptual model. So this has motivated other hypotheses, and I'm going to have only a chance to go through one of them that we've been focusing on here in the group, and then we're well, a couple of them actually. But the first one, Sandra Uter's group at NC State looked at a little bit. We thought maybe there's gravity waves, perturbations, helping to induce these circulations and so forth, but no real evidence yet. Luke Allen, we had a series of microbarographs around New York City, Long Island during impacts. There was very little correlation with pressure perturbations and these bands. The other hypothesis on the table are these cloud top generating cells, convective structures that are producing snow and ice aloft. I circled an area there, and the fallout from those ice might organize into banded structures through vertical shear and deformation. And so this is actually a hypothesis we're exploring here. My postdoc, Josh Carter, has written an objective algorithm here, looking at ER2 data from NASA to look at these structures and their fallout streaks and so forth. And we have radar data here from Stony Brook as well to help with this. Even the cloud top generating cells, this is purely model-based. We don't have any observations. This is motivating maybe future observations. Models have suggested that these structures can be linear under shear conditions. So if the structures aloft are linear, that may actually favor the structures below being linear as well, if you're thinking about the fallout. But there's a lot of open questions about that, and that's basically motivating future work. What we have done, Nicholas Leonardo, my other postdoc, has been working hard at looking at these, what we call PV dipole structures. So I'm going to end my presentation talking about a new theory for these bands that hasn't been proposed before. And that is, we're looking at, he did an idealized baroclinic wave model simulations, and we're looking at, we're following the cyclone, looking at these bands that are forming. You'll see cells, and eventually they'll break up into some bands on the, to the north here. The cyclone center is right here, and then we're looking at these multi-bands right here. So what's forming those multi-bands? So I just have a limited amount of time, but I want to talk about these interesting dipole structures that form in this environment. And so what Nicholas did is follow these structures from genesis to ultimately the band. Starts off as a cell, and I'm going to explain what a PV dipole is, but you can see this positive and negative to PV dipole that exists, and then the band fires up along it and amplifies. Right. So it seems like the PV dipole is there first, and then eventually we get the band. So what are these features? Well, basically we're generating PV here in an environment where, first off, there's a lot of vertical shear in a baroclinic situation. And then you get the latent heating, which changes the theta profile. So a theta gradient in the horizontal. So you ultimately get these PV dipole structures with a positive and a negative around that initial convective cell. And then you get advection of that PV downstream. So you can almost see like it's advecting this way. And then once you get that advection, and these are on the order of a few tens of kilometers, you get, this is subtracting the mean flow, you get the clockwise with the negative, the counterclockwise with the positive, and that induces divergence and ultimately upward motion and the development of this band, right? And this may explain these cells are developing in a region of frontogenesis, but they're moving away from that frontogenesis region downstream, and then they're developing their own circulation with the PV structures and favoring upward motion and the genesis of the band in a region of limited frontogenesis. And because they basically have their own internal circulations and so forth. And then they go through a whole evolution, eventually maturity and decay. I don't have time to get into that, but that second paper goes into the PV diagnostics with that as well. So these are some of the new ideas that are on the table because of this issue that frontogenesis unfortunately doesn't explain the world here when it comes to these bands. And here's, in fact, this conceptual model with this updraft basically tilting, but we also are changing the theta gradient. So we're actually generating PV structures, advecting it downstream, which is what this is illustrating, and then basically the divergence and the new snowfall in the band. So this is a new idea or theory with regards to these snow bands. And the next challenge is seeing this more in observations. We have some observational evidence. We see this in radar with these bands, but we need more thermodynamic data. With that, I'll end. Take a question or two. Thank you. I'm not sure what the time is. I don't have. Well, 15 times. Okay. Is there a question or yeah?
So is the band occurring in the negative PV area? This figure you removed the background to show the dipole, right?
Yes, just the circulation. Remove the flow in this box effectively. The average flow. Yeah.
In terms of the location of the new band, does it occur in the negative?
No, it's right in between. Because that's where this is the negative here in blue, and this is the positive, and this is basically this red area is the divergence, and so it's happening in that basically mid-level by divergence area, and that's favoring basically upward motion, and then basically triggering that whole banded structure with that, and then basically you're getting additional latent heating and so forth, increasing. This amplifying this whole signal as it goes through time. But ultimately, I didn't have time to show you, there's an important mixing and dissipation thing going on as it moves away. It's also moving away into a somewhat more stable environment, and it's getting tougher to generate that convection. And then ultimately dissipation wins in the end. It removes the PV structures. The PV dipoles will disappear, but as long as they're there, these structures seem to exist. So yeah.
Thank you.